Ladies and gentlemen, you are welcome to our virtual sightseeing tour through the churches of Smolensk. Off we go! The Assumption Cathedral, or the Cathedral of the Dormition of Our Lady, as the Russians are used to say, is the most popular point of attraction in Smolensk. The cathedral is enthroned above the town like once the biblical Noah's Ark and stormy floodwaters. The present cathedral arose exactly at the same spot where the old 12th century Assumption Church stood and was destroyed on June 3, 1611, after a dramatic 20-month siege of Smolensk by Polish troops commanded by their king Sigismund III Vasa. The chronicles relate that the remaining defenders took their last shelter in the old Assumption Church. They didn't want to surrender, and they saw no way to escape. They set fire to gunpowder and exploded themselves and the surrounding enemies. The new cathedral had been under construction for long 95 years, from the day of its foundation in 1667 till the moment of its final consecration in 1772. 10 rulers of Russia, Tsars and Tsarinas, came and gone. Originally, the cathedral was supposed to be not so large as it is today. The legend says that the first architect, Alexei Krylov, nearly doubled the dimensions of the cathedral, forgetting to notify the principal in Moscow. The head of the young architect would have definitely rolled if he didn't have a guardian angel. By accident, his guardian angel was the Russian Tsarina Agafya Grushetska, a native of Smolensk. The Russian Tsar pardoned the young architect, and Smolensk was granted a colossal cathedral. In fact, the dimensions of the cathedral are really impressive: 52 meters long, 42 meters wide, and up to 70 meters high. The cathedral witnessed numerous wars, among them Napoleon's Russian expedition of 1812, the Civil War, the Second World War, without having taken any serious damage. However, it was plundered mercilessly several times. In 1933, the Assumption Cathedral was closed by Bolsheviks who arranged a museum of atheism there. That might have saved the cathedral from being completely looted. The cathedral was reopened after the German troops seized Smolensk in August 1941. From that time on, the church service is being held regularly. The Assumption Cathedral is full of treasures and devotional objects. You can't help but admire the beautiful gold and silver-plated iconostasis carved by the Ukrainian craftsmen in the 17th century. The icon of Our Lady of Smolensk, painted in the 16th century by the famous icon painter Postnik Rostovtsev, is of enormous importance for all Russian Orthodox Christians. Unique is the Shroud of Christ, embroidered with silk, gold and silver threads in the 16th century by Princess Efrosina Staritska, the aunt of Ivan the Terrible. The glass cabinet right of the iconostasis in the central aisle displays the metal nitrous of St. Mercurius, the deliverer of Smolensk from Mongolian horse in the 13th century. However, it is completely another story. The bell tower was built by architect Obukhov in the 18th century instead of the old one, built a century before but deteriorated over time. It is worth to mention that upper and the lower column tiers are built in two different architectural styles. Once the bell tower had 14 bells, the biggest one weighing 1,000 pud, it has 16 tons. The oldest bell was cast in 1515. The tower clock, designed by architect Sokolov, was affixed in 1791 to its front in the northeastern part. The Epiphany Cathedral was built at the end of the 18th century in the classical style. Already at that time, the cathedral had an individual heating system and was called a warm cathedral therefore. It boasted once a beautiful iconostasis which was lost in 1812 after the cathedral was looted by Napoleon's troops. The Archbishop's Palace, built in the 18th century, had been for 25 years the headquarters of the present Patriarch of Moscow and all Russia, Cyril. The Church of St. John the Baptist was built in 1703 and is the oldest church on the Cathedral Hill. It had been for a long time the domicile church of the Archbishops of Smolensk. The cellar thereof used to be the bishop's prison for some period of time. The Annunciation Church was paid for by the Leslie family, whose ancestors had joined the Russian army and been in the service of the Moscow Tsar since the 16th century. Today, the church houses a psychological center offering advice to orphans. Saints Peter and Paul Church is the oldest church in Smolensk. It was built in the middle of the 12th century during the reign of Prince Rostislav. The first image of the church dates back to the year 1634 and can be seen on the famous print made by Wilhelm Hondius' Siege of Smolensk. The architectural style comes from Byzantium. In those days it was the most popular Russian church type, a cross-and-dome church, a 3 semicircular apses and a helmet-type dome resting on the polygonal drum. After the annexation of Smolensk by the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth in the early 17th century, it became Catholic, sometime later Greek Catholic, and finally after the reincorporation into Russia again Orthodox. In 1932, the church was expropriated, closed and plundered by Bolsheviks. The Russian Orthodox Church gained it back in 1991. The Archangel Michael Church was built in the late 12th century, not far away from the place where Prince Gleb, the first Russian saint, was killed and buried. The church is named after Archangel Michael, whom the Russian princes considered as the patron saint of troops. This church is the one and only survived sample of the local architectural school from the pre-Mongol period. It was heavily damaged during the war against Poland, the Napoleon's invasion, and during the Russian Revolution in 1917. In 1990, the building was finally taken over by the Russian Orthodox Church. John the Evangelist Church is the second oldest church in Smolensk. It was built in the 12th century by Prince Roman, who was more known because of his charity engagement and less due to his military campaigns. The prince ordered to decorate the church's skeleton and navel. In the 18th century it was reconstructed and acquired its present appearance. After the October Revolution it housed the library. In 1993 the local Orthodox diocese regained the building. A wooden monastery appeared on this site in the 13th century. Abraham was the first abbot there. Today he is considered as one of the most important local saints. In 1765 the stone cathedral of the Transfiguration was built. From then on its official name is the Monastery of St. Abraham and the Transfiguration of Our Lord. After the October Revolution it was kept closed until it was reconstructed and reopened in 2001. The Resurrection Church was built in the 18th century at the site of an old 12th century church, a typical sample of the Smolensk Baroque. The new building was donated by the merchant Sisoyev. After the revolution it was expropriated and is still under secular control. It is a planetarium now. The Holy Cross Church was built in the 18th century and paid for by Colonel Leslie and the merchant Neshevankin. It has 3 altars. At the moment it is under reconstruction. The Church of the Holy Mendelian is more known in Smolensk under the name of the Church are the Trenches. The name of the church may be ascribed to the Polish-Russian War in 1632 till 1634, lost by the Russians. The Church of the Holy Mendelian was built in the 18th century at exactly the same site where 100 years before the string of the Russian trenches stretched along. The late Baroque Intercession Church was built in the 18th century and is situated in the eastern part of Smolensk near the city wall. It was closed after the October Revolution. The church was aged and went more and more to wreck and ruin. In 1993, the Patriarch of Russia Alexius visited the church. 2 years later, a theological college was established there. The Upper St. George Church was constructed in the early 19th century on the right shore of the Dnieper. After the perestroika it was regained by the Russian Orthodox Church in 1994 and carefully reconstructed. Less than 4 years later the church was consecrated by the current Patriarch Cyril, who was the Metropolitan of the Smolensk Diocese at that time. In the year 2000, the Metropolitan Cyril laid a cornerstone for the future Church of the Holy Martyr Mercurius of Smolensk. The church is located on the territory of the Military Academy of the Air Defense. The Gate Church of Virgin Hodigita was built in the late 18th century instead of the Frolov Tower, which had been for a long time the major entry gate into the city from the north, but damaged in numerous wars. In 1602, the Russian Tsar Boris Godunov donated the icon of Our Lady of Smolensk to the local community. The icon was originally located at the tower above the gate. Later it moved inside the church. From its balcony, the French Emperor Napoleon personally shot from 2 small cannons at the retrieving Russian troops. Now the church building houses an Orthodox gymnasium. The down church of St. Nicholas suffered very much during the Napoleon's invasion. The French troops arranged a slaughterhouse there. In the late 18th century, a new port was attached to the church. In 1901, the trade agents and shop assistants of the nearby shops donated a beautiful chapel after the local court satisfied their claim and declared the Sunday as a free work day. Unbelievable reversals of fortune suffered the St. George Church. After the October Revolution, it was expropriated by Bolsheviks who arranged a party archive there. Later it housed the director's office of the Restoration and Conservation Studio. Today it is the parish church of the local theological college. The current Patriarch of Russia, Cyril, contributed a great deal to the construction of the new Church of New Martyrs and Confessors. In 1994, he, being the Metropolitan of the Smolensk diocese at that time, laid a cornerstone for the church, supervised the building work and consecrated the church in 2001. The Transfiguration Church is closed at the time being. The building belongs to the Ministry of Defense. The history of the Ascension Convent goes back to the early 16th century, the time of violent separation from Lithuania and incorporation into the Russian state. Behind the walls of the old Ascension Convent, Princess Natalia Naryshkina, mother of Peter I, completed her primary education. Her father, Cyril Naryshkin, served in Smolensk as colonel in a Streltsy regiment. No wonder that the young Tsar, as soon as he ascended the Russian throne, ordered to build in Smolensk a new stone convent, replacing the old wooden one which his mother liked so much. According to law, Tsar Peter is supposed to have conceived personally a draft project of the future convent. In the middle of the 18th century, the Church of St. Catherine was built on the convent grounds at the instruction of the Abbess Olympiada Radwanska. And finally, 100 years later, the Church of Our Lady of Artyrka completed the architecture ensemble. It is today what it has to be, a working convent. The Trinity Monastery is founded on the site of the former Basilian Monastery. It got its present-day appearance after the reconstruction of 1727 and building the Church of the Immaculate Conception of St. Anne. On the monastery grounds, 4 first metropolitans of Smolensk are buried: Simeon Milikov, Sylvester Chernisky, Sylvester Kreisky and Dorotheus Korotkevich. Today it houses a flax and linen museum. The Church of St. Barbara the Great Martyr goes back to the times when Smolensk belonged to the Commonwealth of Poland and Lithuania. The ground in the first floor, built in the first half of the 17th century as episcopal palace for the Basilian Bishop Lev Krevzy-Zhivusky. In the 18th century, the second floor and the bell tower constructed above the former palace and consecrated as an Orthodox church. After the Second World War, the upper floor was pulled down. It was the Russian Tsar Nicholas I acquired a plot of land for the future Christ Church and granted it in 1843 to the local Protestant community. The church is not in service now. The first Catholic church was built in Smolensk in the second half of the 12th century by the German merchants. After the occupation of Smolensk by the Polish King Sigismund III Vasa in the early 17th century, the Catholic orders of Jesuits, Dominicans and Franciscans came to Smolensk. After the recapture by Moscow, the Catholic churches are converted into Orthodox ones. This church is constructed at the end of the 19th century, following the rapid growth of the local Catholic community. In 1992, the Catholic congregation in Smolensk was restored once again. The first permanent parish priest of the Church of the Immaculate Conception of the Holy Virgin Mary became Father Ptolemaeus, who is leading the community up to this day. We greatly appreciate your attention and are looking forward to welcoming you on our website www.gfs-translations.com.